His base chairs. We watched this. Kurt's a member of the Turner Club that meets here on Monday, and I've seen this before, and it's very interesting. And he goes through all the steps that he made these chairs, and you made, what, 6 or for her daughter, right?
I've made 6 of these, and I've made one of those, and the rest is in pieces.
Okay. Well, I'll let Kurt get at it, and he'll explain how he does it.
Okay.
Welcome.
So, what do you do when your daughter asks for chairs for a wedding present? You've never made a chair before. You learn how to make chairs. So I got, Curtis Buchanan has hundreds of YouTube videos, and he sells pretty nice plans. So I'll show you what plans. You get 4 sheets. Okay, so you get a main half-size plan with certain dimensions and stuff like that. So that shows you what the finished product looks like.
Just a little bit to get the light on it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not getting your voice either, Curtis. What do we got there, Jerry?
Hold on. You turn the mic up. So they do.
Hello?
There you
Can
go.
you hear me better?
Yeah.
All right, so this is called a fan back side chair. It doesn't have arms. And the reason it's called a fan back is if you look at the back spindles, they're not parallel. They fan out like a, I don't know, bird's tail or something. And then each plan, well, at least these plans, came with 2 styles. So this one uses the baluster style legs and posts. She didn't like that fancy back, so we used the other, we kind of mixed and mashed them. But, and then the other style is called the double bobbin, and that's what the rocking chair is made in. Those turnings are a little bit simpler, and you get a what he calls a recipe, and a seat contour for the top. And there's a couple different ways you can use that. And then you get full-size prints of all the turnings. And I think his price is $70. So, not horrible. So here you see the 2 different comb styles and the seat layout with all the sight lines and stuff, and a plan for the bending form for the top piece is called the comb. Okay? So that's what I started with, and I would say the nice thing about chair making is you can use as much power tools or as much hand tools as you want to, because, you know, it's a technology that goes back to the 1700s or something like that. So it lends itself to hand tools. To use power tools, you have to get more creative. I tried the hand methods up front. I couldn't master them. I'd still be working on them. So I did the long skinny spindles on the lathe. It was quite a effort to learn how to make something that long and skinny, but I did kind of master it. A lot of hand steady and stuff like that.
You do it one at a time?
Yeah. So, some of the tricks I employed was I would chuck it on both ends, and I came up with a way to put 250 pounds of tension to stretch it like a guitar string, and that helps, but it's still not enough. If you just touch your tool to it, it immediately goes berserk. So you gotta have your hand on there. And as far as turning techniques, like on a leg like this, these started out as 10 quarter stocks, so 2.5. And I do the intricate bits when it was as thick as possible, and then I'd come back and do the rest of it so that it keeps it as steady as possible. So the Windsor chairs believed to have originated around 1710 in the town of Windsor in England. By the 1730s, it made its way to the colonies. Of course, the Americans improved on the design and changed some of the wood species. So if you see this picture of the Second Continental Congress, they're all sitting on Windsor chairs. Well, except for that guy. But, and there's Nancy giving her approval. I think she's been there that long. So why are they normally painted? Well, they're made from a lot of different types of wood, and if you try to finish them naturally, they just look kind of chaotic. So traditionally, they're always painted. I'm going to paint them with milk paint. But, you know, you got usually hard maple, white oak, or ash for the legs. The seat, poplar, basswood, or pine are the preferred choices. I used ash for the comb and the spindles.
How hard was it for you to find the ash wood?
Quite easy. They cut a tree down at work, and I hauled it home and split it with wedges. They want you to rib or rive out the wood, but I didn't have any luck with that either. I made a fro, but good luck trying to master one. It just splits whichever way it wants to. It's a skill I couldn't master. So I split them down into quarters and eighths, and then I went after them with the joiner and the bandsaw. Some interesting new tools. So this is a draw knife, and what that's mainly used on is this part and this part here to rough it out, okay? And then I'll just get into how I make the seat, because that's probably the most complex piece. So I took certain Office Maxes have blueprint surfaces, okay? And they can make copies of stuff that big, and they don't seem to care about trademarks or anything else, so they're perfectly happy to take your money. So I made paper copies of the original, glued it down onto wood and cut it out. So for the seat, you start out with a 17 by 17 by inch and 3/4 blank, and you mark the center line. And I usually use, this is called the pommel. I guess they all rode horses back then. I use the tip of this pommel as kind of my base point, and I always lay it out from there. And when it's square and flat, you lay out all these hole locations, okay? And you mark these sight lines. So pretty much all the lines that are on here got transferred to the wood piece. Then yes, sir.
How did you transfer the lines?
I have not, there's little notches in the edge here, so I just put points. I take a brad and I drill through all the holes, and I mark those points, and then I just restrike the line. Yeah. So
It's flat.
yeah, perfectly flat. So then you have to drill angle holes, and some of them are straight. The ones for the back spindles are straight. The 6 for the posts and the legs are all tapered, okay? So there's a couple different ways you can do that. So all the holes are a compound angle, but what he's done is he's given you a sighting line and an angle, so that kind of simplifies things. You're not trying to measure two angles. Well, it makes one of them the right angle. So a couple ways to do that. You can, the tapered ones are actually a little bit easier. You can put a string and line that up with your sight line, and then put this thing on there at an angle, and of course it's flat at that point, so it'll stand up, and try to get it that way, okay? But as I've made a few of these things, I've resorted to power tools, so I'll tell you how I do it in the drill press. So my drill press table has a tipping mechanism, and I have an oversized table. So I would, line up the whole location, tip the table at the right angle, make sure my sight line was parallel to the edge of the table, and drill them that way with high quality brad point bits. And I try to do it with my hand, but it's so hard to not change the angle, and you want a clean entry point, and it's just so much easier to do on a drill press. So the 6 chairs, I did the tapering using this. This is a homemade tool. You take what's called, I think, a keyhole saw, okay? And you put a 6-degree included angle taper on here, okay? And you take, some guys take the teeth off, some don't. And basically, you're producing something akin to a cabinet scraper or a scraper on a lathe. You bevel this edge back a little bit to give some clearance, and then you roll the edge, and it'll scrape. Now, I'm not going to mess with this one too much because it's ready to go, but you can very gradually sneak up on your depth, because you got to get, see, it cuts so easy. I mean, it's cut a little bit. So that.
What is the blade in there?
Oh, do you know what a keyhole saw is?
Yeah.
It comes from the hardware store. It's got a wooden handle on it. It's got a point, and so that's what these are made from, is a keyhole saw. And then you turn that on the lathe. You got to cut that notch in there up the middle, which mine probably isn't perfect.
Cut that on the bandsaw?
I think I cut it by hand.
Okay.
When things cut fast, I tend to make mistakes fast. Since then, I've decided to spend the money on a good hole. I think these run about 150 bucks, but they work very nicely. It's just got a single cutting edge. It's got a pilot on it, and then I can use this in my drill press. So, if you want to go the cheap route, that works. But every turn you got to take it out, and it gets gummed up with chips and clean it out. And so, if you're going to do a lot of them, you want to use. Okay. Yes, sir.
You got tapers on both sides of that, right? So what do you do, lay out from the top side and then drill a hole? And then
All
lay
the-
from the bottom side?
All the holes are targeted from the top side. And this one right here says drill here if you do it prior to carving, and drill here if you do it after carving, because this surface has moved a little bit, okay? But all these holes are, he's got 2 targets, one prior to carving and one after carving. So you can do either one. I did mine before, okay? But it's very easy to make a mistake, because you know, is that angle this way or this way, and was that taper from this side or that side? So you gotta keep your wits about you. So these are tapered from the bottom. These are tapered from the top. And these are angled and fanned out a little bit. Okay.
One quick question, once you have it in the drill and you drill your compatible, you then put in the taper hole like that, fits to the gap right away?
Yeah, and that's where this little gauge came in. I couldn't put the leg in. Well, yeah, sometimes I had to flip it over. But I made this little gauge, and I think I forgot it, but I have a similar gauge for the leg. 2 blocks of wood with a taper, and I know that, so that helps you get the taper straight and the right size. So I know when that thing goes on, and it's really easy to hold the edge of that and see if you've got a belly to it, is you want these pieces to be really precise, because that joint takes a lot of stress.
Is that something, I'm sorry, is that something that's listed on the plans to do that, or is it something you come up with on your own?
No, you can watch his videos. He's super duper traditional. He won't do anything that they didn't do in the 1800s.
Okay.
I mean, he uses a bandsaw, but that's about it. So I'm not quite that good. So this tells me when to stop for depth.
You have a mark on there that you go to?
You see that stripe line?
Not really. But maybe where it's for it.
There's a TV there, yeah. Yeah, okay.
All right. So I guess once you got all the holes drilled, then you need to put in what's called the gutter groove. And I made a router template. The order you do things in is important, because once these corners are gone, there's nothing to hold on to anymore. So put that on there and just routed that groove with my router. You know, these things are big enough that one of them I wanted to come back to, but the wood had shrunk enough that it didn't match the pattern anymore.
What kind of rubber bit do you use?
3/16 round nose.
Okay.
Yeah. So, put the gutter groove in. Now, the way I do the seat contouring went through a whole evolution, and I'll just walk you through it. So, I can't even tell you how many hours it took me on the computer to model that. I do 3D modeling for a living, but this is a whole different category. I took that seat contour and measured it out and made points and made a contour of this thing. And then I have a friend who's a guitar maker, and he is a 3D duplicator. You ever seen one of those, like Pantograph?
Yeah.
So the way that works is you've got a stylus over here, and you've got a router bit over here that's the exact same shape. And you sweep that stylus across your piece, and it cuts the mating piece. The thing needed a major tune-up, which I didn't realize starting out, so I had a few issues. But if you're not making a whole bunch of them, there's a way that works just as good. This was not made using that method. So what I did was, you take this guy here, and you lay it on there, and you line up the centers.
Can you hold it up so we're...
Sure.
Okay, okay.
So each one of these lines represents a depth. So I just went around with a scratch off and marked a whole bunch of points over those lines. So I poked through the paper into the wood, okay? And then you go mark what the depth is, okay? Took it over to the drill press and drilled probably 100 holes, depth holes. So you just go around the contour, drill depth holes, okay? So now you got a point to go down to. And then you start going after it with the draw knife, this guy, those guys, scrapers.
So are you using a regular pointed drill for a wood?
Yeah, not a brad point,
Okay, okay.
a normal
This is
twist.
where I point.
Yeah, yeah. And you just keep taking material off. It looks like it's got smallpox, you know, in the process. But you just keep taking material off until all the dots are gone, and it turned out every bit as good, if not better than the fancy 3D thing. Some problem areas. This ledge here is very narrow and it's short grained, so it's very easy to break that out. It's a pain in the neck. You gotta really sneak up on this area, because that gutter groove's already in there. And the back side, I made another template, but I'm using it for a mouse pad. I kind of marked on here where the tangent point was, and you go after it with the draw knife. I can't think of who makes these blades, but if you've never, this is called a low angle spoke shave, and Ron Hawk, I think is the guy's name, he sells them, and his tools are super sharp. I wish I had a scrap piece of me. Can I use the workbench? It'll cut end grade like glass. It's really a nice tool. So the blade costs maybe $50, and then you make the handle for it.
Is that Ron, H-A-W-K?
H-O-C-K.
Oh,
There you go.
H-O-C-K.
Yeah, he makes plain blades. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it for the,
So
For the seat.
you cut out the profile of that before you start carving or after?
before. Yeah, I skipped that step. Yeah. So one of the last things I do is cut this back profile, because when you leave that on there, you've got something to hold on to. So that's kind of the last thing to come off is back here.
You clamp that to your workbench?
Yeah, I put it in the vise. Or I figured out a way to, I come down, I have a basement shop, so I come down from a floor joist and I've got a clamp that I can hold that down. Yeah, holding on to this thing is not easy. All right, so, yeah, I think that's about it for the seat.
So is that a female or a male shave?
We'll take a vote on that. So another tool I made was this radius spoke shave. That was mainly to do this area here. Another tool I made is called a scratch stock. Very simple. You take a piece of broken bandsaw blade and you put the shape you want. Cut a slit down the middle of your board, and I put a little step here to act as a guide. So how that's used is there's a little bead that runs along, and you just kind of scratch out that bead. I don't know if I did it on this one. Yeah, it's there. There's another little scratch bead on the top of that runner. Yeah. So, let's see. Oh, there's a thing called a scorp, which is like this, only curved. I didn't bother with that. That's to rough out that thing there, but this thing did a fine job. That.
Kurt, did you finish all 6 chairs already, or is that just the first one of 6?
No, they're all done.
You're done?
And then she took about 8 months to figure out what color she wanted. That's why they're not finished.
How long did it take to make the 6?
Well, I would say the whole process was maybe 10 months, but a whole bunch of that was watching YouTube and making plans, and because I was very apprehensive about certain aspects of it.
Is the table for the first anniversary then?
That's already passed. Okay. Do you see the difference in the turning styles? That's called the double bobbin. That's called the baluster. He came out with that plan after these were pretty much done, and I had a couple of cones left over, and I figured, yeah, why not? So that is called a sewing rocker. It's also called a ladies rocker, but basically it doesn't have arms, and it's small. Okay, so I talked about, I started with splitting out quarters from ash. I talked about that. So the kitchen chairs were made for poplar, and the rocking chairs are made from pine that I had laying around.
So this specify anything for the rocker on the bottom of the wood so it doesn't walk?
No, but he recommends quarter sawing for the runners, but I don't know if it walks or not. Are there certain woods that don't walk?
Maybe I understand the grain in the wood and some, if you grab the hold of the rug and it makes it walk, you don't need to rock it, it doesn't stay in the same spot.
Yeah, I don't know, it hasn't been tested. All right,
A rock or flat, we can move that much. Yeah.
yeah.
Kurt, the reason they're called a sewing rocker or ladies rocker is because the ladies with big hoop skirts can sit on them more comfortably.
Oh, okay. So, you aim for precision when you're making stuff, but at the end of the day, every joint is match fit, one way or another. I usually sand the tenons until I just go in. One of the things that they employ, and it's working against me at the moment, is you try to keep the female piece kind of wet or green, and then you super dry these tenons as dry as like oven dry. And when you put them together, then this swells, that shrinks, and I can't get it apart anymore. So I don't know how I'm going to glue it. Two of us trying to get this apart. It's just all right. So yeah, the legs, they have the 6-degree taper on it. I made a little jig with basically, here's what I did. I took this thing and I super glued 2 nice straight ingrained pieces of maple onto another board to make myself a guide, right? So as I'm turning it, when I get close, I can hold that up there. I can see from the edge where it's high, how big it is. So when that socket jig just goes up to the line on the leg, I know that one's ready. So that's how I keep the accuracy. Let's see. I told you this already, but I do like this probably started out as 2 inches square, even though it doesn't need to be. And I do the detail areas first when it was a big, thick piece. And then of course, the more wood you took off, the squirrelier it gets. Yeah. All right, so the assembly process. Let's see where I'm at here. Talked about that. So there's the duplicator. This right here is the router bit. There's the stylus. So my first way to do it was to put it between centers, put tension on it, spin it slowly, and I made a template with a router, okay? And I'd run the router down the length in stages, right? And I'd get them to the point where I could finish them with 60 grit. They were far from perfect. When things would look bad, it looked like they were chewed by a beaver. But I had to hold my thumb right next to that router bit, which I wasn't comfortable with, to stabilize it as I went along. I have since learned to turn them without that. I made, what is that? There's a super slippery material, UMHB, some kind of white plastic. So I made myself kind of a B block out of that. And then my finger wouldn't get hot, you know. You're always fighting. You put too much pressure on, you burn your finger, not enough, and it vibrates too much. By using that piece of plastic as a steady rest. Some people ask, why didn't you make a steady rest? Well, you constantly be moving it, and you have to have something round to start with, and it just wasn't worth, didn't think it was going to work. So, in terms of making lots of duplicate parts, here's some ideas I'll pass along to you. Here's a leg. So, what I would do is I would try to make the first one close to the pattern, but whatever came natural is what I would go with, because it's far easier to replicate whatever comes natural. So if it didn't match the pattern, but it was easier for me to do, I went with that route. I didn't keep going back to the pattern to try to make it exactly like it, because nobody knows what the pattern looks like anyway. So I extended these lines down, and you know, I do sizing cuts, and yeah.
For those that don't turn, you're talking about holding up on the other side of the spindle while you're measuring and making your marks, correct?
No, I would start somewhere, usually like that point, and then that would become my reference, and I'd mark on the wood.
While it's in the lid.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, so you're
Yeah.
holding it on the other side while you're marking.
Or,
Or at some point you have to hold it somewhere in there.
Well, I
Or up front.
hold it up like this and just transfer those
Okay.
marks to the thing, and then spin it, and make it go around.
All right.
And then, yeah, lots of sizing cuts. Yeah, I had to start over, you know. One miscut and you're done. So what this shows is the way I came up with super dry. So I have a kiln made out of an old freezer, an upright freezer. And underneath that MDF box is a hot plate. And there's a little black wire coming in here, that's the thermostat, okay? So I would super dry my tenons by poking them through those holes. So the tenon would be down in the heat, but the rest of it's out in the ambient air. So one of the tricks to try to keep those joints staying tight is this super drying the tenons and using green wood for the mortises. Okay, so the top comb, cut out blanks, and these taper. Okay, so when they were straight, I took a 2x4 and I put that taper into it and a ledge, and I ran through my planer, right? So So now I've got kind of a trapezoidal shape. The backs are straight, but the fronts are tapered. Okay, 3/4 inch down here, and I don't know, about 1/8 of an inch up there. Then I think I put this scratch groove in and shape the top with various tools. You pretty much do everything before you bend it. Okay, so I made a bending chamber out of PVC pipe, and I bought a steam generator. And you steam them for about an hour, and then this is the bending shape. I use cherry because that's what I have, but it's also tapered. See that? So you take your piece, gotta work fast, clamp it in the middle, and start working these ends around, and you can see that it's sprung back quite a bit, but he claims that if you follow his process, that it'll spring back, make it different. Yeah, I cooked it at 140 on the jig, as he recommends, but yeah. Then I tried to get them back to green state. That was a mistake. That makes the bend come out. Okay. Cover most of that. Okay, so here you can see some of my in-process pictures. I color-coded the different depths so I could not drill the wrong depth. So that's what all those colored lines are. And you can see me in the process of cutting it there. You can see the dimples from the drill showing through. Okay, so the posts are these parts, and they're long and skinny, so I turn those under tension.
How did you apply that tension?
Okay, so I have a normal chuck down here, a bunch of ways is the short answer, but I started off using what's called like a tenon chuck. It tightens down on round stuff, different sized collets, but that tended to slip loose. And when that 250-pound spring let go, that wasn't pretty. So I bought a little, what's the name?
Jacobs?
No, not a Jacobs. Wood, I'll think of it in a minute. They make tiny little chucks. You can get them as small as that. So I've got a small powder, something powder, record powder, yeah. I found that, so I have the one-way chuck, but that's not what I was using. My jet chuck, the taper part was just soft enough to get a little bit of thread in there for a pull, a drawbar, okay? One Way sells an adapter that will thread onto this and then have 1 1/4 inch thread on the other side to put a chuck on, okay? So I would take this off and take the screw out. So that left this thing free to slide in here. And I put the drawbar in, which is just a threaded piece of rod, into the back of the taper, a die spring, which is just a heavy duty kind of spring. And that die spring has 250 pounds per inch, a couple washers. And I would crank that nut 16 times, 250 pounds. And then you very gingerly let go of that, and the whole thing's under tension. So the tension loop is going through the lathe. There's an article on, let's the attorney website, AAW. Yeah, I think I referenced it sometime here. Okay, so let me give you a feel for how you get these crazy angled holes in these seats. A lot of tricks. Use these backs and legs. You can see that they've got writing on them. Let's see. I'll just give you a flavor of how this goes. So you want your grain perpendicular, so you want your growth range perpendicular to the seed grain. And that has something to do with creating the least amount of movement, I'm not sure. All right, so you put those in there, okay? So now, let's see, there we go. So you get them oriented, and then you put rubber bands over here. And on the double bobbins, you use these grooves. On the balusters, you use those little scribe marks, okay? Then you can take a ruler and find the middle between these two rubber bands. So that gives you kind of that. And when you're doing these side stretchers, right? The rocking chair doesn't have side stretchers, right? No, right? For whatever reason. All right. So how do you get this? How do you get these crazy angles that way? So you put your rubber band on here. And then I can find this thing. So if you take a piece of aluminum angle iron and you rub it back and forth on the wood, it'll mark the apex of the curve. So that you can see one here. That puts a line on the side of your leg. And you come down here and you put this along your rubber band and you sight that down the leg, okay? And then you use your digital angle gauge, figure out what that angle is. You got one here, and you got one there, you mark it on the leg. And then, so the legs go in the drill press using these guys with some clamps. Tip your table, got the angle marked on the leg, and drill. Little time fix this now. But that's the way that's done.
Getting folded chairs.
Excuse me?
My daughter's getting folded chairs.
Yeah. Good plan. Good plan.
I understand that you only want to keep things just off just a little bit.
You know, the 6 chairs, the biggest challenge I had with the 6 chairs was getting it right on center. I don't know why, but that's very hard to judge by eyeball. So sometimes they're a little, like that. That was tricky. For some reason, the biggest problem I'm having on these rocking chairs is getting this stupid runner. These slots don't want to be straight with the runner, and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but that's the challenge I have with those. I could have it in place, but
Kurt, could we take a break?
sure.
We'll take 10, 15 minutes.